Hello there, everyone, and welcome to GamePoints episode 362, a weekly little get-together. We talk about recent gaming news. As always, your host, Stephen Brown, and tonight we have some Switch 2 rumors on the horizon. Seems like PlayStation 5 is selling pretty goddamn well, and Xbox and Square Enix might be starting to rebuild their relationship again after so many years of missed releases on that console. But first, I want everyone here to know this is an audience interactive podcast. So if you're watching live here at Twitch TV/GamePoints or later at any myriad of video hosting platforms, be they Rumble, BitChute, YouTube, etc., feel free to join the conversation with any questions, comments, concerns you might have. Just try to keep them germane to the topics on hand. All right, let's go ahead and move into the very first story here. Coming up here from Video Game Chronicle. The link to this and everything else will be provided down below or over on our Discord server if you want to read these stories for yourselves, and I recommend you do. One moment. Sorry about that. Sources say Nintendo is targeting 2024 with a next generation console. Once again, this is from Video Game Chronicle. There have been rumors of a Switch 2 for the past, it feels like, year at this point. The Switch itself is starting to get a tad long in the tooth, going on 7 or 8 years at this point. It really does feel like their release schedule slowing down. I would imagine that Tears of the Kingdom will probably be one of its last major releases. That's not to say the last one. We still have Pikmin 4, New Super Mario RPG, the reboot of that, etc. But when it comes to like huge Switch releases, I do think we might have seen the last one of those. Maybe one more before they move on to whatever Nintendo has planned next. Let's go ahead and go to the article itself here. Key partners have development kits ahead of planned launch, at least that's what sources say. Now, keep in mind, sources say tends to be Greek for fake news. However, when you have multiple of them coming in, as this article alleges they have, you can probably tend to bet that there's at least some truth to it. Additionally, if you're going to launch in 2024, you would have to have developers with dev kits now, at least your big ones. Also, this is one of the reasons why I think we haven't heard anything about Metroid Prime 4, because they probably just completely scrapped all plans on the Switch and moved full production over it to whatever this Switch 2 may be. Enough guessing, though. Let's go ahead and move on to the article itself. Development kits for Nintendo's next console are now with key partner studios, with a launch plan for next year, sources have told Video Game Chronicle. According to multiple people with knowledge of Nintendo's next-gen console plans, the company is likely to release new hardware during the second half of 2024 to ensure it has ample stock on day one to avoid the kind of shortages we saw with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. If that is indeed the case, I would imagine you would start seeing Nintendo rolling out what their plans would be for this new Switch, including an announcement sometime early next year. I would not imagine that they would announce it this year, lest they sabotage sales of the Switch. After all, if you have a new console coming out next year, why buy this year's version? So I can fully see them, maybe, if this is true, you won't hear a single word of it until probably, say, February or March of 2024. Back to the article. Although specific details on the console are being kept closely guarded, those VGC spoke to indicated that the next-gen console would be able to be used in portable mode, similar to the Nintendo Switch. Two sources VGC spoke to suggest the console could launch with an LCD screen instead of the more premium OLED in order to bring down costs, especially considering the increased storage needed for higher fidelity games. The current Switch comes with just 32 gigabytes of internal memory, while many current-gen PlayStation Xbox games are over 100 gigabytes. I would not expect PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X quality on whatever Nintendo's next console is. Nintendo has always marched to the beat of its own drum. They do not chase next generation graphics like the two other big boys do. I would expect something that might be equivalent to, say, late gen PS4, and even then that might be pushing it. Nintendo does like to make their things for cheap. Now, cheap does not mean cheaply made as much as just affordable, I guess I should say. Back to the article itself. Like its predecessor, the Nintendo console will also accept physical games via cartridge slot. That's good. Physical media is great. I'm sure that the lot of people out there who are collectors are loving to hear that. No word on whether or not it's going to be backwards compatible or not. We'll see, I guess, as we get closer to 2024 if more details of this leak out. Back to VGC. Other details, such as backwards compatibility support for Switch games, physical and digital, remain unclear. Nintendo has said it wants to convert as many of its Switch's 100 million user base as possible to its next system, although some third-party publishers are said to have expressed concern that legacy port for Switch games could negatively affect sales of next-gen titles. Bullshit, by the way. A few people out there go, well, I have Call of Duty from 5 years ago. Do I really need this next-gen Call of Duty? That's bullshit. That's more them saying we don't want to necessarily put support and resources into updating these games to run on next generation. Let's be 100% clear here. No one ever sat back and went, no one in quotes, ever sat back and went, no, I don't need to buy the sequel. I have the last one. That's just an asinine argument. Nintendo, however, is known for their gatekeeping shit. It's more than likely from Nintendo and from these third-party companies that they're not so much affecting sales of next-gen titles as much as it is taking away a chance for them to resell you the same shit you've bought over multiple times. Now, I would hope that with Nintendo's recent push into an online space with their online account and all that good stuff, that would just be tied to whatever your next console is going to be, so you can easily bring over your digital titles to the next thing. As far as physical media goes, I wouldn't necessarily sell that Switch just yet, because if they do change that cartridge in any way, shape, or form, and it is a tiny son of a bitch, I wouldn't be surprised if they do, then I doubt that they would have slots in whatever the Switch 2, the Switch predecessor, whatever they're going to call it. I doubt it will have the slots to accommodate those older Switch games, if they even do backwards compatibility to begin with. So hold on to your old hardware. There's no point in selling any of this stuff anymore, and you're only getting pennies on the dollar for what you paid for it, when in so many cases it seems like you can just keep it. And, I mean, I don't want to sound like a hoarder or anything like that, but when was the last time you actually sold something from GameStop and got anything worth a damn, and didn't a few years later down the line go, shit, I should have kept that? A lot of people do that, where they're like, I should have kept that copy of Contra, or even minor things like that. It's not worth it. So just hold on to it, or at the very least give it to a friend. It's time. It is absolutely time for a new Nintendo Switch of some kind. We keep calling it the Switch 2. I don't think that it will be that. I don't think Nintendo has ever named anything a sequel to anything. So you had like Nintendo and Super Nintendo, things like that. Nintendo 64, GameCube, Wii U is probably the closest we can get to that. But even then, they changed that name a little bit. They seem not to like numbers. And I'm fine with that. Who knows what this new predecessor machine is going to be. But I would imagine it's going to sell very, very well, since Nintendo is still kind of the only handheld market in town. Not counting mobile games. Well, that's kind of its own weird genre on there. I know a lot of analysts like to combine mobile sales into their analytics. But when it comes to this show specifically, we deal in consoles and or, well, the hybrids like this. And I do like the fact that it is going to be a hybrid. At least that's what it sounds like, because honestly, I don't like playing my Switch in handheld mode. I know it gets better resolution and it seems to run better, but my neck just can't. I can't be head down the entire time. It bothers me. So I'm glad to see them keeping the hybrid format. Let me know what you guys think down here. Let me know what you're hoping to see with the next generation of Switch coming out. It is time for it. I want to say the Switch dropped in... Oh, man, it couldn't have been 2013. I think it was like maybe 2017. Let's look that up real quick. When did the Switch come out? I think it was 2017, maybe late 2016. 2017. March 3rd, 2017. Okay. So that would put it at about... It's over 6 years old now. We're coming up on 7, which is very long for a console, by the way. That PlayStation 3 generation where they lasted 8 years was... highly unusual when it comes to generation. So if it comes out end of 2024, that would put it about just shy of 8 years. Yeah, this tracks. This absolutely tracks. And that, of course, doesn't take into account that it could be delayed, putting it over 8 years. But all of this is, of course, speculation, and as we've already said, sources say is Greek for fake news in many cases, so don't necessarily trust whenever someone says anonymous sources or sources say. However, VGC does have a decent track record, and when you speak to multiple sources, that I'd be willing to bet this is true. Moving on to another console that's not the Switch, PlayStation 5 had a rather impressive milestone, surpassing 40 million in sales. What we have here is a blog post from Sony themselves, essentially saying, well, just that. All these words and gobbledygook were just more or less coming out saying, hey, we've reached a milestone of 40 million PlayStation consoles sold through to gamers since launch. That's really the only takeaway you need from all of this right here, because remember, when a company has a good number to announce, they love to drone on and on about it. They won't fucking shut up about it. When it's bad, they won't say a goddamn thing. So you can tell how pleased Sony is with themselves by just the girth of this article here. Now, for comparison, PlayStation 4, which is the fastest selling PlayStation console to 40 million, hit this total about 2 months earlier than PlayStation 5. So PlayStation 5 is lagging a little bit behind. However, it is important to note that the PlayStation 5 was hammered rather hard with component shortages, which meant Sony wasn't necessarily able to supply the demand at the time. Conversely, however, we did go through a rather nasty spell a few years back when everyone was kind of confined to their homes and console sales shot through the roof. So, read into those two tidbits as you will. Either way, it's still an impressive number. Sony seems to be very happy with the PlayStation 5 sales, although I will admit that it's kind of disheartening to only finally now starting to get to the point where we can see what this console can do 3 or 4 years into its life cycle already. You're starting to now get the big games launching, but we really haven't had a Sony exclusive from Sony itself. Keep in mind, and when I say exclusive, what I mean is console exclusive. God of War, a lot of the recent stuff was meant to be placed on PlayStation 4 and 5. I shouldn't say God of War Ragnarok, because I believe that was next gen only. But it was this year that we're really starting to see stuff that is designed for the PlayStation 5 itself, and not a weird half step that can run on both consoles. It really was only this year when it was starting to fully embrace. I'd say Spider-Man 2 is probably going to be their biggest test on whether or not that console can actually deliver a next-gen experience, and I do expect it's going to move a lot of PlayStation 5s, because it is only going to be found on PlayStation 5, with a potential PC port later on down the road, of course. And then let's go ahead and move on to the third big console out there, Xbox, with a little bit of Xbox news. Right here, you're seeing a Twitter tweet, an X tweet. Right? Isn't it an X? X is post. I think they're called posts now. I don't know. Either way, this thing here from Jeff Keighley showing that Final Fantasy XIV is finally coming to the Xbox. This is more important than you might think. You might not like Xbox. You might not even care for Final Fantasy XIV at all. But for the past few years, it seems to have been somewhat of an icy relationship between Square Enix and Microsoft. Many Square Enix titles being released on competitor platforms with no plans of ever bringing them over to the console, to the Xboxes themselves. That, however, seems to be changing with Final Fantasy XIV finally coming out on there. Here from Gamatsu, once again, article will be provided down below. You have Square Enix CEO Takashi Karu promising better support for Xbox platforms going forward, which he made this promise at the Final Fantasy XIV Fan Fest out in Las Vegas a few days ago. Huge moment, by the way. You got Phil Spencer, he's essentially the head guy at Xbox and the head of Square Enix getting together, shaking hands on stage for their next stage of the partnership, because this is going to expand beyond Final Fantasy XIV itself. To the article here. Microsoft Gaming CEO Phil Spencer appeared on stage to announce the Xbox Series version of Final Fantasy XIV alongside the game's producer and director Naoki Yoshida before Kiru joined them. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing those names. Phil Spencer also said the following. We see this as a seminal moment in our relationship with Square Enix and the Final Fantasy team as we look to partner more closely together in the future. CEO Kiru said the following, adding this. And one more thing, as CEO of Square Enix, we want to continue to deliver fabulous games to fans across the world. And of course, we want to welcome the Xbox community as well. So with today's announcement of Final Fantasy XIV coming in spring 2024, and wherever possible, we are planning to bring our games to Xbox for players around the world to enjoy. We're really looking forward to working closely with Phil and Xbox team to make this possible. So, does that mean you'll see Final Fantasy VII Remake on Xboxes? Who knows? I'd expect it would be their bigger titles like that. You might not see things like Valkyrie Elysium or Diofield Chronicle or even Octopath Traveler 2 making their way over here. But if it's a huge title like, say, the inevitable Final Fantasy XVII, yeah, I'd expect to see that on Xbox. I have to ask, why the sudden shift in tone? Well, for a while there, in my opinion, this is all speculation at this point, so keep that in mind, Square Enix seemed to be shaping itself up for a sale, moving as many games in development out to the market as fast as they could. There's a reason why last year we were flooded with so many releases from Square Enix. I want to say it was like 13 games total from them in 1 year. Now, most of them were minor projects, sure, but why wouldn't you space that out? You also had the severing of your ties of your Western studios, IDOS, etc. They seem to really have been trying to slim down and get into shape to be bought out by someone. And the rumors for the longest time were that someone was going to be Sony. However, as months of those rumors turned into years on those rumors, and there seemed to be no move to pick them up at all, you have to wonder if Square Enix didn't start realizing maybe their future wasn't with Sony. I'd also imagine that the recent, more or less, go ahead with the Activision Microsoft merger had something to do with this. Sony actively trying to fight that from happening would have looked very poor, themselves acquiring one of the biggest video game publishers out there in Square Enix. It would have definitely defeated their case a little bit more than it actually was. During that time, you have Square Enix sitting there in limbo, wondering if Sony will they or won't they to them, and then probably got tired and decided to say, fuck it, we're going to go out on our own again, and let's just forget about this deal for now. Enter this new relationship with Microsoft. This could be Square Enix saying to Sony, hey, you missed your chance. We're going to start putting our shit on some Microsoft systems now. Once again, this is all pure speculation. I don't know. I could be dead ass wrong. But it makes sense. As Stephen Colbert would say, it has a certain truthiness to it, and I tend to think that that happens to be the case. Everything tracks. So that's kind of how I'm going to say this played out, at least in my head. But I wouldn't put any money on it, of course. Let me know what you guys think about what this warming up means to Microsoft in general. Hopefully that does mean we'll be getting some excellent titles on Microsoft. I want more games on more platforms. I don't even own an Xbox myself. I'm a Sony/PC guy/Switch myself. So I have no particular horse in this race, but having excellent games on more platforms tends to benefit everyone. I never understood the console world bullshit myself, beyond occasional playful ribbing, but that shit has gotten horribly toxic over the past few years. And that's a word that I hate to use, but it is what it is. Let me know what you think down below. Moving on, I can see both sides of this. I, for one, am psyched to hear this news, but I get why some people might be upset about it. Just this caters to the way I play games better. From PC Games N, Assassin's Creed Mirage is 5 times shorter than Valhalla. Thank God. Now, I didn't play Assassin's Creed Valhalla because I was not down for another 160-hour checkbox experience where I combed the entire map looking for every single little icon and collecting or questing or killing whatever I find there. I just don't have the time for it. However, I also understand there's a segment of the population that really does love that shit. And more power to you. I get why this would be bad news to you. And I do feel bad that something that you enjoyed has changed a little bit. For me, however, this is a very positive change, and I'll go into that a little bit more in the future, and why I think this is where Ubisoft games are going to be going with all of their future releases, be it Far Cry, Watch Dogs, or even Assassin's Creed. Ubisoft confirms that Assassin's Creed Mirage is going to be short, which makes the month of October slightly less daunting for video games. French video game YouTuber Julien Chezet, and once again, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing these things, recently managed to sit down for an interview with Ubisoft lead producer Fabien Selamon, who talked about Mirage's city of Baghdad, protagonist Basim, and average internal play times for the game. Thank goodness Assassin's Creed Mirage won't be an 100-hour epic. Seems like the writer of this article tends to agree with me that they're getting a little, shall we say, bloated for my tastes. You can hear Solomon talk about Assassin's Creed Mirage average run times below at the 1704 mark, but as it's in French, we at PC Games N have transcribed and translated the quote for you. That said, unless the person who wrote this article is a native French speaker, there might be some errors. Keep that in mind whenever you see a translated quote of anything. Things don't necessarily translate one-to-one to English. To the quote. Given that we do a lot of playtesting internally at Ubisoft, it's part of our process. We really want to get as close as possible to the players, so we'll say the latest playtimes we received average around 20 to 23 hours. That can go up to 20 to 25 hours for completionists, and we say those who will be rushing the game will be around 20 hours. Considering the last game in the series, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, is about 60 hours long, and 143 hours if you want a completionist run, this is significantly shorter. And it does lean into Ubisoft's shift into games as a service. They have been very open about saying they want to start moving into more of a games as a service style model. Assassin's Creed Mirage is probably going to be the first of that new Assassin's Creed, I don't know what you want to call it, project. And if you ask me, they're going to be making shorter games, which means they can crank them out faster, somewhat similar to a seasonal model, to use the games as a service battle pass style setup, where it's a bunch of smaller, more constrained experiences once a year, maybe even twice a year, given the size of Ubisoft's development teams, as opposed to here is 160-hour experience over the course of a couple years here and there. This way, and let's be 100% cynical here, this way they can create content that they can still charge a full price for, even though it's a fifth of the size, and release more of it. Now, for me, I don't mind them cutting 100 hours off Assassin's Creed Valhalla. 100 hours of that, I played through Odyssey. That game took me 130 hours to do everything in. It really only needed to be about 50. A lot of that shit felt like busy work. It felt like bloat. It felt like padding so they can come out and say, our game is 150 hours. You're going to get so much value out of it. Yeah, that's cool and all, but if most of that content is boring as hell, what value does it actually have? Now, I fully, once again, recognize that there are people who love that shit, who love tracking down every single treasure chest and checking them all off on their list and exploring every little question mark on their map and uncovering every inch of it. And there is, admittedly, some fun to that. I like doing that every now and then. But what Assassin's Creed turned into is that every year or so I have to devote essentially 2 weeks of my life. And I don't mean like 2 weeks as in I can do it in 2 weeks. I mean like 2 full weeks total in our time, 140 plus hours into dealing with that game. And I kind of get tired of it after a while. Ubisoft, the game, certainly became a meme there for a while. Well, all of their games started following that same similar pattern. I'm glad to see them switching it up just a little bit of it. That doesn't necessarily mean Assassin's Creed can't go back to the big sprawling world that was in Valhalla or Origins or Odyssey. But let's explore some different things in this game a little bit. Now, why don't you give me a smaller map but denser city? I would love to see something that's maybe a fifth of the size of Odyssey's map or even Valhalla's map, but it's just one massive, dense, packed city with thousands of people, hundreds of thousands of people even, depending on how far you want to go, roaming around in it. Like, take downtown sections of Watch Dogs and turn that into just that square block. Turn that into an Assassin's Creed game. Where it's like, yeah, I'm an assassin. This takes place over the course of a night, and I'm going to be taking out members of this council that got to the Templar Council that's getting together in this building. I think that would be goddamn awesome. So I am somewhat positive on what we're seeing here. And I do think, like I said, this is going to be the future of Assassin's Creed games as Ubisoft leans fully into its game as service model. And, well, everything that comes along with that. Here are going to be your battle passes. Here's your new installment every year as they go back to their yearly installments they seem to try to get away from. And I think it might be good for the company itself. Because as it stands right now in video game development in general, once you have to start making a game now. And if you want a big AAA experience of what it's like we're used to seeing, it's going to take you 5 to 7 years to finish. Who even knows if the genre you're making it for exists? Hell, who even knows if the console is still a next-gen console? 5 or 7 years from now, we're looking at PlayStation 6. We're looking at video cards that are hot today reaching old age in 7 years. So you can't even future-proof your shit at that point. So yeah, smaller, more contained games I think are going to be much healthier for the industry overall. That's my take on it, though. Speaking of the health of an industry, we do have a little bit of bad news as we move on to our last story here. This here is a statement from CD Projekt Red CEO Adam Krasinski. And, well, whenever you see organizational update, that probably means layoffs, and that's what we're getting right now. We're not going to bury the lead on this one. Let's go ahead and go right to the important bit here. To meet our own high expectations and ambitions to create the best role-playing games, we not only want to have the best people, but also the right teams. We've carefully assessed all teams in the company in terms of their expected contribution to delivery of our strategy. There's no easy way to say this, but today we are overstaffed. We have talented people on board who are finishing their tasks, and based on current and expected project needs, we already know we don't have other opportunities for them in the next year. The outcome of the studio parting ways with around 100 people, which is roughly 9% of the entire team. This will not be immediate, as some employees will be let go as late as first quarter of 2024, but in the spirit of transparency, we've chosen to share this information now. One, cool that you are sharing this right now and just telling people, hey, this is coming. There are many companies out there that don't even bother telling people about layoffs until the day they're happening, and that's kind of fucked. So it is going to give you some time to start, well, getting your resumes in order, etc., perhaps looking for new work. This was to be expected, considering that CD Projekt Red is canceling a couple of their projects they had going on. There was that game that was being developed by the Molasses Flood, which seems to have been shelved, or at the very least is being reconfigured into something else. And like with every company, not just game publisher or developer, but just companies worldwide right now, the economic situation out there is very, very rough and precarious. And you have places cutting corners wherever they can to batten down for the upcoming storm. Make no mistake, if you see a news report talking about how the job situation improving, or there's an economic recovery on the way, they're lying to you. In my opinion, it's not financial advice. There's a shitstorm coming. And it is going to be bad, in my opinion. And the fact that you see all of these companies laying people off, canceling projects, they know it's true too. Don't listen to the press. Don't listen to the experts. Watch what the people who have skin in the game are doing. And almost universally, a lot of them are scaling back. A lot of them are cutting costs. And a lot of them are laying people off because they know what's coming. Our heart, of course, goes out to everyone affected by the layoffs at CD Projekt Red. Given your pedigree at that studio and the thriving game development scene in Poland, it seems, I'd imagine most of you would get picked up relatively soon, at least hopefully. As to everyone else out there, once again, I always give this statement whenever I talk about game layoffs. Please, for the love of God, if you are watching this, update your resumes. Try to save a little bit of extra. And this goes to anyone, by the way. This doesn't go to just game developers. Update your resumes. Try to save a little bit extra while you can. Perhaps maybe not go out for that steak dinner if you can maybe buy 3 or 4 dinners out of it and pocket a little bit of extra money. Grow a garden. Anything to become a little bit more self-sufficient, because in my opinion, it's going to get real bad real quick. And you're not even going to, it's going to happen so fast, it's going to strike you dumbfounded. The more prepared you are for it when it happens, the better off you're going to be. As much as I hate to end the show on a downer like that, that does do it for the news, which means that does it for the show as well. This has been GamePoints episode 362. Thank you all for showing up. I do stream this live here at Twitch TV every Tuesday around 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time if you want to come on in and be part of the conversation. But if you can't join us live, you can also watch it at any myriad of video hosting platforms, be they YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, etc. Regardless of where you watch this show, your support is, of course, appreciated. And if you like what you saw here, you want to do support it, you know what streamers want. Likes, bits, follow, subs, comments, shares, all that good stuff. You can follow me on Twitter, or X, as it were, at CapitalistPig21. You can join our Discord server, link provided down there with all the information of the stories. And, of course, I do stream throughout the week as well, so I hope to see you all there. That does it for Game Points, and until next week, I'm out of here.